I'm Elizabeth, 35 female. I live with my husband, David, in a quiet suburban neighborhood that feels a million miles away from the chaos of my work as a clinical research coordinator. My life is built on data, protocols, and verifiable facts, a world of black and white that I find incredibly comforting. But the story I'm about to tell you is about the gray areas, the ones that exist within a family, where emotion trumps logic and where the truth can be devastatingly inconvenient. It's the story of how my sister-in-law, Jessica, built a throne of lies and how I, using the very skills I apply in a laboratory, systematically dismantled it. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It started, as these things often do, on a perfectly normal Sunday. The four of us, me, David, and his parents, Michael and Susan, were gathered in their cozy, lived-in living room. Sunlight streamed through the large bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and highlighting the happy, cluttered evidence of a life well lived. Framed photos on every surface, stacks of books on side tables, and Susan's half-finished knitting project tucked into a basket by her armchair. It was a picture of domestic tranquility, a scene I had come to cherish as part of my own life since marrying David 5 years ago. Michael, a retired principal with a calming, authoritative presence, was recounting a story about a particularly troublesome student from the 90s, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. Susan, a woman whose warmth was the gravitational center of the family, listened with a fond smile, occasionally interjecting with a detail he'd forgotten. David sat beside me on the sofa, his hand resting comfortably on my knee. Everything was as it should be. Then the front door burst open and Jessica swept in. That's the only way to describe her entrances. She never just walked into a room. She swept in, a whirlwind of perfume, brightly colored clothes, and an energy that demanded all attention shift to her. At 32, 4 years younger than David, Jessica had always been the dazzling, slightly chaotic star of the family. While David was the steady, reliable son who became a financial advisor, Jessica was the creative, unpredictable daughter who chased her dreams as a freelance event planner. Her career seemed to consist of a series of dramatic highs and terrifying lows, a cycle that kept my in-laws in a perpetual state of low-grade anxiety. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, breathless, dropping a designer handbag onto a chair. "You will not believe the day I've had. The caterer for the Harding Gala is trying to substitute prosciutto with domestic ham. Can you imagine the horror?" We all murmured the appropriate sounds of sympathy. This was typical Jessica. She would arrive late, create a flurry of drama around her work, and then settle in, expecting to be catered to. But today, something was different. After the initial commotion, a strange sort of quiet fell over her. She sat on the edge of the ottoman, wringing her hands, a behavior so out of character that it immediately put everyone on high alert. "Jess, is everything okay?" Susan asked, her motherly intuition kicking in. Jessica looked up, her eyes theatrically wide. She took a deep, shaky breath and placed a hand over her stomach. It's more than okay. It's wonderful. Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant." The room erupted. Susan gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, and tears immediately welled in her eyes. Michael's stoic facade broke into a wide, beaming smile. He stood up and pulled his daughter into a bear hug, lifting her off the floor. "That's my girl, that's incredible news," he boomed. David was right behind him, clapping his sister on the back, a look of pure joy on his face. "Jess, that's amazing. You didn't say you were even seeing anyone seriously." Jessica gave a watery, brave-looking smile. "It's complicated. His name is Alex. He's a photographer I met working an event. It's still new, and he travels a lot for work, which is why you haven't met him. We were being careful, but, well, here we are. A little surprise." I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I hugged her, too, offering my sincere congratulations. A baby was wonderful news. My in-laws had been not so subtly hinting about grandchildren for years, and while David and I weren't quite there yet, this would make them ecstatic. And it did. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of joyful planning. Susan was already talking about turning the spare bedroom into a nursery. Michael was calculating the best way to start a college fund. The mood was electric, charged with happiness and anticipation. Over the next few weeks, the pregnancy became the central topic of all family communication. Jessica would send blurry ultrasound photos to the family group chat, pictures she claimed were taken at a private clinic because her irregular work schedule made it hard to book with a regular OBGYN. She talked endlessly about her symptoms, the strange cravings, the morning sickness, the exhaustion. Susan was in heaven, doting on her daughter, cooking her special meals, and buying adorable baby clothes. Michael, ever the practical one, was more concerned with Jessica's financial stability. "Are you sure you're prepared for this, sweetheart?" he asked her one evening over the phone while we were visiting. "A baby is a huge expense, and with your work being so unpredictable." "I know, Dad, I know," Jessica said, her voice laced with a carefully constructed weariness. "Alex is trying to send money when he can, but his overseas assignments are making it difficult. And my big project, the one that was supposed to set me up for the year, just got postponed. The client's funding fell through. It's a nightmare. I don't know how I'm going to afford the deposit on a bigger apartment, let alone all the medical bills." The bait was laid, and my generous, loving in-laws took it without a second thought. The next day, Michael and Susan transferred $20,000 to Jessica's account. They told us it was an advance on her inheritance, a gift to help their daughter and future grandchild have a secure start. David and I agreed it was a wonderful gesture. How could we not? It was for the baby. Jessica cried tears of gratitude, promising to pay them back as soon as her postponed project was back on track. She claimed the money would go toward a down payment on a new 2-bedroom apartment and to cover the high costs of her specialized prenatal care. The performance was flawless. She played the part of the struggling, single mother-to-be with heartbreaking perfection. We were all her captive audience, and we believed every single word. Looking back, the signs were there, small inconsistencies and oddities that should have raised red flags. But we were all so blinded by the joy of a new life, a new member of the family, that we didn't see the truth. We didn't see that we weren't celebrating a new beginning, we were funding a lie. The stage had been set, the actors were in place, and the curtain was about to rise on the second act of her elaborate deception. The joy that had enveloped our family for 2 months shattered with a single, devastating phone call. It was a Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from work, the sterile, orderly scent of the clinic still clinging to my clothes. David was on a business trip in Chicago, so I was looking forward to a quiet evening with a book and a cup of tea. My phone rang, and the screen flashed with my mother-in-law's name. I answered with a cheerful, "Hi, Susan." What came back was not a greeting, but a choked, guttural sob. "Elizabeth, oh, Elizabeth." My blood ran cold. "Susan, what is it? What's wrong?" "It's Jessica," she managed to say between gasps. "She lost the baby. There was so much bleeding. She's at the hospital. She had a miscarriage." I sank onto the nearest chair, my own breath catching in my throat. I felt a wave of nausea and profound sadness. The imaginary face of the baby I'd been picturing for weeks, a little boy with David's eyes or a little girl with Jessica's curls, vanished in an instant. It was a physical blow. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Which hospital? I'll come right now." "St. Mary's," Susan cried. "Michael is driving me. Please just call David." I hung up, my hands trembling as I dialed my husband. When he answered, I could barely get the words out. His cheerful greeting died in his throat as he heard my tone. When I told him what happened, there was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sound of such raw pain that it broke my heart. He promised to get the first flight home in the morning. I drove to St. Mary's in a daze. The emergency room was the usual chaotic scene of controlled panic, but I found Michael and Susan huddled together on a set of uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting area. Susan was weeping silently into a tissue, her face pale and drawn. Michael looked a decade older, his expression a mask of grim sorrow. He stood when he saw me and wrapped me in a hug that felt heavy with unspoken grief. "How is she?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They've taken her to a private room," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "The doctor said she's physically stable, but she's devastated, utterly broken." A nurse eventually led us to a quiet room at the end of a long hallway. Jessica was lying in the hospital bed, her face turned toward the window, away from the door. She looked small and fragile against the stark white sheets. Her shoulders were shaking with silent sobs. Susan rushed to her side, stroking her hair and murmuring comforting words. Jessica didn't respond at first. She just lay there. The very picture of inconsolable grief. When she finally turned to look at us, her eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy. It was the most convincing portrayal of heartbreak I had ever seen. "I lost my baby," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's gone." The next few days were a blur of somber activity. David flew home, his own grief palpable, and went straight to the hospital to be with his sister. He and his parents barely left her side. I did what I could, managing the logistics of a family in crisis. I cooked meals and brought them to my in-laws' house, fielded calls from concerned relatives, and tried to provide a quiet, stable presence amidst the emotional storm. Jessica was discharged 2 days later. She went to stay with her parents, claiming she couldn't bear to be alone in her apartment. Her grief was performative and all-consuming. She would sit in the living room for hours, staring into space, a single tear occasionally tracing a path down her cheek. She spoke of the baby constantly, giving him a name, Liam. She described in heartbreaking detail the future she had planned for him, the lullabies she had wanted to sing, the tiny outfits she had already bought. Susan and Michael were shattered, their own grief magnified by their daughters. They catered to her every whim, treating her like a delicate piece of glass that might break at any moment. David was equally devastated, his protective, brotherly instincts on full display. He spent hours with Jessica, listening to her talk, holding her while she cried. No one questioned her story. Why would we? Miscarriages are a tragic, common reality. Her pain seemed so real, so visceral. And yet, deep in the recesses of my analytical mind, a tiny, dissonant chord was struck. It was something small, a detail that didn't quite fit. The night of the incident, when Susan called me, she said Jessica was at St. Mary's. But when David arrived and asked for her, the hospital had no record of her being admitted through the ER. Jessica explained it away smoothly. "Oh, when Alex, my baby's father, found out, he insisted on having me transferred to a more private clinic he knows, the Harrison Women's Center," she explained, her voice weak. "He arranged everything. He wanted me to have the best care, away from a chaotic public hospital." It sounded plausible. A wealthy, concerned partner wanting the best for her. No one pressed for details. It felt ghoulish to interrogate a grieving woman about hospital logistics, so we accepted it. We all did. But for me, a clinical researcher who deals with hospital protocols and patient records every single day, the explanation felt thin. A private transfer from an ER in the middle of an emergency event is a complex procedure, not something easily arranged with a single phone call from a traveling boyfriend. There were other things, too, small inconsistencies. In her grief, she mentioned being 12 weeks along, but I distinctly remembered her telling us she was only 8 weeks along just a week prior. She described medical procedures in vague, often contradictory terms that didn't align with standard obstetrical practice. I tried to dismiss these thoughts as the product of my overanalytical, cynical mind. I told myself I was being cold and unfeeling, scrutinizing a woman at the lowest point in her life. This was grief, I reasoned. Trauma messes with memory and details. I pushed my doubts down, ashamed of them, and focused on supporting my husband and his family. I played my part, offering condolences, cooking casseroles, and nodding sympathetically. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I didn't know it then, but in the fertile ground of Jessica's perfect performance, that seed was already beginning to sprout. For about a month after the miscarriage, our family life revolved around Jessica's grief. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered all other conversation. Any attempt to talk about something cheerful or mundane was met with a sorrowful sigh from Jessica, a reminder that her world had ended and it was inappropriate for hours to continue turning. My in-laws remained wrapped around her finger, their sympathy matched only by their generosity. When Jessica tearfully confessed that she had already paid a non-refundable deposit on the larger apartment using their $20,000 gift, they told her not to worry about it. "Just keep the rest of the money, dear," Susan had said, stroking her hair. "Use it to get back on your feet, take a trip, heal." Michael had even offered to help her break the lease on her current apartment without penalties, calling in a favor from a friend in real estate. She was being financially and emotionally cushioned from every possible consequence. David, bless his heart, was still deeply worried about his sister. He'd suggest I invite her out for a quiet dinner or a movie, hoping to lure her out of her shell of sadness. Each time I did, Jessica would politely decline, saying she just wasn't ready. My own suspicions, which I had tried so hard to suppress, refused to stay buried. They were like a persistent hum in the back of my mind, a low-frequency warning that something was fundamentally wrong. My work is my life's passion. As a clinical research coordinator, my job is to ensure the integrity of data in clinical trials. I manage patient records, verify medical histories, and cross-reference every single data point to ensure it is accurate and verifiable. My brain is hardwired to spot inconsistencies, to question anomalies, and to follow a logical trail. And Jessica's story was riddled with them. The first major crack in her narrative appeared by complete accident. Jessica had a strong social media presence, a key part of her freelance event planner persona. Her Instagram feed was a carefully curated highlight reel of glamorous parties, artistic floral arrangements, and chic outfits. Since the miscarriage, she had, quite understandably, gone silent. No posts, no stories. But one Friday evening, while scrolling absently through my own feed, a post from one of her friends, a woman named Tiffany, whom I'd met a few times, popped up. It was a photo gallery, a photo dump from a recent trip to Miami. The caption read, "Finally posting from our amazing Miami getaway 2 weeks ago, so needed this." There were pictures of cocktails, beaches, and a group of women laughing on a hotel balcony. And in the very last photo of the carousel, there she was, Jessica. She was standing on a yacht, wearing a tiny bikini, holding a glass of champagne, and laughing, her head thrown back in pure, unadulterated joy. She looked vibrant, healthy, and decidedly not like a woman who had just suffered a traumatic miscarriage 2 weeks prior. But it wasn't just her demeanor. It was her body. In the picture, her stomach was perfectly flat and toned. There was no trace of a 12-week pregnancy bump, not even the small, persistent swell that often remains for a while after a miscarriage. I stared at the photo, my heart hammering in my chest. 2 weeks ago, I did the math. The Miami trip would have taken place just 1 week after she was supposedly discharged from the hospital, 1 week after losing her baby. 1 week after her family was catering to her every need as she lay on the sofa, consumed by grief. I felt a surge of cold fury. I quickly saved the photo to my phone before Tiffany could think to delete it. The photograph became my obsession. It was the first piece of concrete evidence, the first verifiable data point in a sea of emotional claims. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the trip was a desperate attempt to escape her pain. Maybe she was trying to feel normal again. Maybe some women just bounce back physically very quickly. But the champagne, the unrestrained joy, it didn't add up. The woman in that photograph was not a grieving mother. The next day, I approached David cautiously. We were in the kitchen, making coffee. "Hey, I saw something a little strange yesterday," I began, trying to keep my voice casual. "A friend of Jessica's posted some photos from a trip to Miami." David frowned. "Miami when?" "About 2 weeks ago. Jessica was in one of the pictures. She looked surprisingly good, really happy." David's brow furrowed in confusion, but then his expression softened into one of brotherly defense. "Well, good for her. Her friends probably dragged her along, trying to cheer her up. I'm glad she was able to smile, even for a minute. God knows she deserves it. I hesitated, wanting to press further to show him the picture, to point out the flat stomach and the champagne, but I saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't ready to see it. His love for his sister was a blindfold, and if I tried to rip it off, he would only resent me for it. He wanted to believe the best of her, and my suspicions would sound like a cruel attack on a grieving woman. I realized then that I was on my own. If I was going to uncover the truth, I couldn't rely on anyone else. David would not be my ally in this, not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the image of Jessica on that yacht burned into my mind. The pieces started to click into place with terrifying clarity. The vague medical details, the mysterious, untraceable boyfriend, the conveniently postponed work project, the sudden, desperate need for a large sum of money, and now, a secret vacation filled with champagne and bikinis. It wasn't just a series of unfortunate events. It was a script, a meticulously crafted story designed to manipulate the people who loved her most. She hadn't lost a baby. I was becoming more and more certain that there had never been a baby at all. The entire pregnancy, the joy, the hope, the subsequent tragedy, it was all a lie. A cruel, calculated $20,000 lie. My disgust, which had been a quiet simmer, began to boil. This wasn't just about money. It was about the devastation she had inflicted on her own family for personal gain. She had taken their love and trust and weaponized it against them. And as I lay there in the dark, I made a decision. I would find the truth. Not for my own satisfaction, but for Michael and Susan, and for the husband I loved who was being so cruelly deceived. I would use my skills not to cure a disease, but to expose one. The investigation had begun. My professional life is a world of protocols. When we start a clinical trial, we create a detailed plan, an investigation protocol, that outlines every step, every procedure, every data point to be collected. It's methodical, painstaking work. I decided to apply the same principles to uncovering Jessica's deception. I needed more than just a suspicious photograph. I needed irrefutable proof, a chain of evidence so strong that even my loving, trusting husband and in-laws couldn't deny it. My objective was clear: to prove that there was no pregnancy, no miscarriage, and therefore, no justification for the money she had received. My first step was to tackle the medical side of her story. Jessica had claimed to be treated at two facilities, the emergency room at St. Mary's and a private clinic called the Harrison Women's Center. St. Mary's was easy enough to verify. While patient privacy laws would prevent them from giving me details, I knew a former colleague, a nurse named Maria, who worked in their ER. I met her for coffee, framing my questions carefully. "It's for a work project," I lied, hating the taste of the words in my mouth. "I'm reviewing ER to clinic transfer protocols for obstetric emergencies. I was wondering, if a woman came in with a miscarriage, how would a transfer to a private facility like, say, the Harrison Women's Center be handled?" Maria shrugged. "It wouldn't really. Not from the ER. If a patient is having an acute event like that, we have a duty of care. We destabilize her and admit her to our own maternity ward. We wouldn't just hand her over to a private clinic in the middle of a crisis. The liability would be insane. A transfer would only happen if it were a non-emergency, pre-scheduled procedure. And even then, it would involve a mountain of paperwork on both ends." Her answer confirmed my initial suspicions. A seamless, on-the-spot transfer arranged by a traveling boyfriend was pure fantasy. Next, I turned my attention to the Harrison Women's Center. A quick search online revealed that it was a real place, a high-end boutique clinic known for its wealthy clientele. It also had a very active social media presence, including a public Facebook page where they often posted news and staff updates. I spent an evening scrolling through months of their posts. And then I found it. A post from 3 months ago announcing that the center would be closed for a full month for extensive renovations and equipment upgrades. The closure dates perfectly encompassed the week Jessica claimed to have been a patient there. The clinic had been physically closed. It was impossible for her to have been treated there. This was my first piece of hard, undeniable evidence. The second part of my investigation focused on the mysterious boyfriend, Alex, the elusive photographer. Jessica had been careful not to give a last name. She claimed he was traveling and hard to reach. I went back to Jessica's social media. While she hadn't posted anything recently, her older posts were a treasure trove of information. I scrolled back for months, looking for any mention of an Alex, any photos of a man who fit the description. Nothing. But her tagged photos were a different story. Friends would often tag her in pictures from events she had planned or attended. I found a group photo from a gallery opening 4 months ago. Jessica was there, looking fabulous, and tagged in the photo was a man named Alex Mayer, a well-known local event photographer. His profile was public. I scrolled through his feed. He was handsome, talented, and according to his posts, had been on assignment in Southeast Asia for the last 6 months. His timeline showed a continuous stream of photos from Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. He had not been in the country, let alone in a whirlwind romance with Jessica, at any point during her supposed pregnancy. He was a real person, but his role in her story was a fabrication. She had likely chosen him because his real-life travels provided the perfect cover for his non-existence in her life. She had stolen a man's identity to serve as a prop in her play. The final piece of the puzzle was the money, the $20,000. My in-laws believed it had gone toward a deposit on a new apartment and medical bills. I needed to find out where it really went. This was the most difficult part, and it required me to cross a line I never thought I would. David and Jessica, despite their different personalities, were close. So close that they shared an Amazon Prime account to save on fees. Avid had given me the password ages ago, and I had never used it. I felt a pang of guilt, but my resolve was firm. I logged into the account and checked the order history, filtering by Jessica's shipping address. My stomach churned as I scrolled through her purchases from the past 3 months, the period since her parents had given her the money. There were no baby items, no maternity clothes, no books on pregnancy. Instead, I found a litany of luxury purchases. A $500 designer handbag, a top-of-the-line laptop, expensive noise-canceling headphones, and flight confirmations. Not just for the trip to Miami, but for an upcoming trip to Las Vegas, with a 3-night stay booked at a luxury hotel on the Strip. The most damning evidence of all, however, was a receipt for a service called ClearPath Debt Solutions, with a payment of exactly $10,000 made 2 days after she received the money from her parents. It all clicked into place. Jessica hadn't needed money for a baby or an apartment. She had been in significant debt. The entire pregnancy, the doting boyfriend, the tragic miscarriage. It was an elaborate, cruel scam to get her loving parents to bail her out of a financial hole of her own making. She had used their love and their dream of a grandchild as leverage to pay off her debts and fund a lavish lifestyle. I meticulously documented everything. I took screenshots of the clinic's renovation notice, the photographer's travel timeline, and the Amazon order history. I saved the picture of her on the yacht in Miami. I arranged it all in a folder on my computer, each piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of her lie. I felt no triumph, only a deep, chilling sadness and a burning rage. She hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen her parents' joy, manufactured their grief, and made a mockery of their trust. She had made my husband mourn a nephew who never existed. My investigation was complete. Now I had to create a new protocol, one for revealing the truth. With a folder full of irrefutable proof, a part of me wanted to storm over to my in-laws' house, slam the evidence on the coffee table, and expose Jessica for the manipulative fraud she was. I imagined the shouting, the tears, the dramatic confrontation. But my logical mind, the part of me that runs clinical trials, knew that such an approach would be a disaster. A sudden, chaotic data dump would cause panic and denial. David would feel ambushed, my in-laws would be overwhelmed, and Jessica, a master manipulator, would find a way to twist the narrative, painting me as a jealous, cruel sister-in-law attacking her while she was still in mourning. A chaotic confrontation would allow her to control the emotional fallout. I couldn't let that happen. No, the reveal had to be as cold, as methodical, and as undeniable as the evidence itself. It needed to be a controlled experiment where the variable was the truth and the outcome was clarity. I needed to remove Jessica's ability to spin the story. She had to be confronted not by my accusations, but by her own actions, laid bare for everyone to see. I had to become the quiet architect of her reckoning. My plan began to take shape. It couldn't be a random intervention. It needed a stage, an event where the key players were already gathered and expecting a normal, pleasant evening. The perfect opportunity presented itself on the calendar, my father-in-law Michael's 66th birthday. It was 3 weeks away. The family always celebrated with a special dinner, and I knew Jessica wouldn't dare miss an opportunity to appear as the loving daughter, especially since she was still milking her parents' sympathy. I decided the dinner would be at our house. This was crucial. It would be my territory, a controlled environment where I could manage the flow of the evening. I called Susan and offered to host. "I'd love to do something special for Michael's birthday," I told her. "Let me handle everything, the cooking, the cake, all of it. You guys just relax and enjoy." She was touched by the offer and readily agreed. With the venue secured, I began planning the evening with the precision of a surgical procedure. The dinner itself would be normal, even festive. I would cook Michael's favorite meal, roast beef with Yorkshire puddings. We would make small talk, share stories, and create an atmosphere of warmth and love. This was important. I wanted the contrast between the familial love in the room and the coldness of Jessica's deception to be as stark as possible. The confrontation would not happen until after the meal, after the cake had been cut and the birthday song had been sung. It would be the final, unexpected course of the evening. Next, I had to prepare David. This was the most delicate step. I couldn't risk him warning Jessica, but I also couldn't blindside him completely. I owed him more than that. I chose my moment carefully, a quiet evening a week before the party. I sat him down on the sofa, my heart pounding. "David," I started, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to talk to you about Jessica, and I need you to listen with an open mind without jumping to her defense just for a few minutes. Can you do that for me?" He looked wary but nodded. I didn't show him everything at once. I started with a single, undeniable piece of evidence. The screenshot of the Harrison Women's Center's Facebook page announcing their closure for renovations. "Jessica said she was treated here the night of the miscarriage," I said calmly, holding out my phone. But according to their own page, they were closed. The entire clinic was shut down. I saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes, the first crack in his protective wall. He took the phone, read the text, and then read it again. That can't be right. Maybe she got the name of the clinic wrong. Grief does strange things to memory." "I thought of that," I replied, keeping my tone even. "But she was very specific. She mentioned the name twice, to your mother and then again to you." I then showed him the photo of Jessica on the yacht in Miami. This was posted by her friend Tiffany. It was taken 1 week after she was supposedly discharged from the hospital. He stared at the photo, his jaw tightening. He saw what I saw, the laughter, the champagne, the complete absence of a post-pregnancy body. The denial was still there, but it was weaker now, tinged with a dawning horror. "I don't want to believe this, Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "She's my sister." "I know," I said softly, taking his hand. "And I'm not asking you to condemn her. I'm asking you to help me get to the truth for your parents' sake. They gave her $20,000 based on a story that is falling apart. They deserve to know what they paid for." I didn't show him the Amazon receipts or the information about the debt. That was too much, too soon. I had given him just enough to plant the seed of doubt, to make him question the narrative. I told him about my plan for Michael's birthday, framing it not as an attack, but as an intervention. A chance to get everything out in the open in a calm, controlled way. He was quiet for a long time, his mind clearly at war. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a sad resolve. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll support you, but we have to do this carefully. No yelling, no accusations, just questions." I had my ally. The final piece of my plan involved a bit of technological stagecraft. I bought a new, larger television for our living room, a birthday gift for the whole family to enjoy. The day before the dinner, I set it up and connected it to my laptop. I created a simple, clean PowerPoint presentation. It wasn't flashy. It was clinical. Each slide contained a single piece of evidence: the photo from Miami, the screenshot of the clinic's closure, a timeline of the photographer Alex's real travels, and finally, the Amazon purchase history. Each slide was a simple, factual statement, stripped of emotion or accusation. As I finalized the presentation, a wave of anxiety washed over me. Was I doing the right thing? I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of my family. There was no going back from this, but then I thought of Susan's tears, Michael's worry, and David's misplaced grief. Their pain was real, even if its cause was a fabrication. They were the victims, and they deserved the truth. My resolve hardened. Jessica had directed her own twisted play for months. Now it was time for the curtain to fall, and I would be the one controlling the lights. The evening of Michael's birthday began with an almost surreal sense of normalcy. The smell of roast beef filled our home, mingling with the scent of the apple pie I had baked for dessert. Michael and Susan arrived first, bearing gifts and warm hugs. Michael was in high spirits, genuinely touched that we were making a fuss over him. David, though visibly tense to me, played his part as the gracious host perfectly, pouring wine and steering his father into a conversation about his beloved golf game. He caught my eye from across the room and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. We were in this together. Then Jessica arrived. She swept in, wearing an elegant black dress, a picture of somber chic. She had a beautifully wrapped gift for her father and a sad, gentle smile that she bestowed on everyone. She was still playing the part of the grieving daughter, albeit one who was trying to be strong for her dad's special day. The performance was nauseatingly good. She hugged her father tightly, whispering, "Happy birthday, Daddy. I wish things were different this year, but I'm so glad we're all here." Michael's eyes welled up as he held her. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means the world to me." We sat down to dinner, and for an hour everything was painfully, beautifully normal. We talked about politics, a new movie David and I had seen, and Susan's plot. NS for her garden. Jessica chimed in occasionally, her contributions always tinged with a subtle melancholy. She mentioned how she had been looking at paint colors for the nursery before, and then she'd trail off, letting the unspoken tragedy hang in the air. Each time, Susan would reach across the table to pat her hand, her expression one of deep sympathy. I watched this performance, this masterful manipulation of my family's love, and felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. My resolve, which had wavered for a moment, solidified into steel. After the main course, David and I cleared the plates. As I brought out the pie with candles flickering on top, we all sang "Happy Birthday." Michael blew out the candles in one puff, making a wish for the health and happiness of my family. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. After we finished the dessert, I stood up. "Dad," I said, using the affectionate term for Michael, "we have one more surprise for you. We all pitched in and got a new television for the living room. We thought we could all watch a movie on it later." Everyone murmured their approval. We moved from the dining room into the living room. The large, black screen of the new TV dominated the wall. I picked up the remote. "Before we put a movie on, though," I said, my voice calm and even, "I put together a little digital slideshow. Just some family photos and memories for your birthday, Michael." This was the lie, the one piece of deception I had to use to set my trap. Susan closed her hands together in delight. "Oh, Elizabeth, that's so thoughtful." Jessica settled onto the sofa next to her mother, a polite smile on her face. David stood near the fireplace, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I took a deep breath and pressed play. The first few slides were exactly what I promised: happy family photos. A picture from my wedding to David. A shot of Michael and Susan on their last anniversary. A funny photo of David and Jessica as kids, making faces at the camera. It was all designed to lull them, to reinforce the image of the happy, loving family we were supposed to be. Then the sixth slide appeared. It was the photo of Jessica on the yacht in Miami. On the screen, I had simply added a caption in plain white text: Miami, 1 week after the miscarriage. A confused silence fell over the room. I could see Jessica's smile freeze on her face. Susan squinted at the screen. "Oh, that's a lovely photo, dear. Was that an old trip?" "No," I said simply, my eyes locked on Jessica. "Her friend Tiffany posted it a few weeks ago. The trip was last month." Before anyone could fully process this, I clicked to the next slide. It was the screenshot of the Harrison Women's Center's closure notice. The caption read, "The clinic was closed for renovations during the week of Jessica's supposed treatment." Susan's hand, which had been resting on Jessica's arm, slowly pulled away. Michael leaned forward, his brow furrowed, reading the text on the screen. "What is this, Elizabeth?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "It's evidence, Michael," I said softly. I clicked again. The next slide showed a picture of the photographer, Alex Mayer, with a timeline of his Instagram posts from Southeast Asia. Caption: Alex Mayer, the supposed father, has been in Asia for the past 6 months. Jessica shot to her feet. "What is going on? Elizabeth, what are you doing? Are you attacking me, after everything I've been through?" Her voice was shrill, laced with panic and indignation. She was trying to seize control, to play the victim. But I wasn't going to let her. I didn't raise my voice. I simply clicked to the final, most damning slide. It was a summarized list of her Amazon purchases, next to a screenshot of the $10,000 payment to the debt consolidation company. The caption was brutal in its simplicity: "Where the money really went." The room was utterly silent for a long moment. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. All eyes were on Jessica. The color had drained from her face. Her mask of grief had shattered, replaced by a raw, cornered panic. Michael was the first to speak. He didn't look at the screen anymore. He looked at his daughter. His voice, when it came, was terrifyingly quiet. "Jessica, is this true?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked from her father's stony face to her mother's, which was crumpled in disbelief and dawning horror. She looked at David, who just stared back at her, his expression one of profound disappointment. She had nowhere to run. There were no more lies to tell. Finally, she broke. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It was a pathetic, choked sob. I was in so much trouble," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The debt, I didn't know what to do. I was going to lose everything." Susan made a small, wounded sound, like an animal in pain. "The baby," she whispered. "Our grandson Liam." Jessica couldn't meet her mother's eyes. She just shook her head, her body racked with sobs. In that moment, the truth finally filled the room, cold and ugly and undeniable. There was no baby. There was no miscarriage. There was only the debt, the greed, and the breathtaking cruelty of her deception. The family dinner was over. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was pure, unadulterated chaos. Susan let out a strangled cry and collapsed back into the sofa, her face in her hands, her sobs echoing in the stunned silence. Michael, his face a granite mask of fury and heartbreak, simply pointed a trembling finger toward the door. "Get out," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Get out of this house. Now." Jessica, still weeping, tried to appeal to him. "Daddy, please, I can explain. I was desperate." "You let your mother grieve for a grandchild that never existed," he shot back, his voice finally cracking with the weight of his pain. "You took our love and you used it to pay your bills. There is no explanation for that. Get out." She looked desperately at David, her last hope for an ally. But David just shook his head, a look of utter disgust on his face. "Just go, Jess," he said, his voice hollow. Defeated, she grabbed her purse and practically fled from the house, her sobs trailing behind her until the front door slammed shut, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The weeks that followed were the most difficult our family had ever endured. The once warm and easy relationships were now strained and fractured. Susan was utterly broken. The grief she had felt for her lost grandchild was now replaced by the grief for the daughter she thought she knew. She barely left the house, spending her days in a state of quiet shock. She wouldn't speak Jessica's name. It was as if her daughter had ceased to exist. Michael's reaction was one of cold, simmering anger. He was a man who valued integrity and responsibility above all else, and Jessica's actions were a betrayal of every principle he held dear. He immediately engaged a lawyer to see if they could recoup the $20,000, not because they needed the money, but on principle. David was caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to me and our marriage, his love for his parents, and the residual instinctual bond he had with his sister. He was angry with Jessica, deeply so, but she was still his sister. He admitted to me one night that she had been calling and texting him nonstop, sending long, rambling messages filled with apologies, excuses, and pleas for him to intercede on her behalf with their parents. He told her he couldn't, not until she took full responsibility for her actions. Their relationship was fractured, perhaps irreparably. I, in turn, found myself in a strange position. I was the hero who had uncovered the truth, but I was also the catalyst for all this pain. Susan, while grateful, sometimes looked at me with a hint of sadness in her eyes, as if I were the embodiment of the moment her world fell apart. Michael treated me with a new level of respect, but our interactions were more formal, strained by the gravity of what had happened. There were times I felt a profound sense of guilt, wondering if it would have been better to let the lie stand, to let them live in blissful ignorance. But then I would remember the calculated cruelty of Jessica's deception, and I knew I had done the right thing. The truth, however painful, is always better than a comforting lie. Slowly, very slowly, the family began to heal. The legal proceedings ended with Jessica agreeing to a payment plan to return the full amount to her parents over the course of 5 years. It was a legally binding admission of her guilt. She sent a long, handwritten letter of apology to her parents. Susan read it, cried for an entire day, and then put it away in a drawer. She didn't respond. Jessica's life, from what we could gather, unraveled. Without her family's financial and emotional safety net, her freelance career faltered. Her friends, having heard rumors of the real story, began to distance themselves. The glamorous life she had projected on social media crumbled into dust. She had traded her family's love for a temporary financial fix, and the price was her entire world. Months later, on what would have been the baby's due date, Susan called me. Her voice was quiet but steady. She asked if David and I could come over for dinner. When we arrived, the house felt different. Lighter. The heavy blanket of grief, both real and manufactured, had finally lifted. We ate dinner, and for the first time in a long time, we talked about the future. We talked about David's work, my research, and their plans for a trip to Italy. Jessica's name was not mentioned. As we were leaving, Susan pulled me aside. She took both of my hands in hers and looked me straight in the eye. "Thank you, Elizabeth," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "What you did was the hardest thing in the world, and it hurt all of us. But you saved us from living a lie. You brought the truth back into this family, and that is a gift. A painful gift, but a gift nonetheless." In that moment, any lingering guilt I felt washed away. The path had been excruciating, but it had led us here to a place of honesty. Our family is smaller now, and the scars from Jessica's betrayal will likely never fully fade. But what remains is real. It's built not on performance or deception, but on a difficult, hard-won truth. The echoes of her deceit still linger, a quiet reminder of how easily trust can be shattered. But they also serve as a testament to our resilience, to our capacity to rebuild, and to the quiet strength that comes from choosing truth over lies, no matter the cost.